from the KAKE Studios. This is KAKE News on your side at 5.
The sun goes down in the heart of Kansas. A nightmare EF5 tornado touches down near a town called Greensburg.
This is from the National Weather Service in Dodge City. They have issued a tornado emergency. This is very rare.
Main Street is left in ruins.
I lost everything. I ain't got nothing.
Neighborhoods are unrecognizable.
There's no way anybody can fathom what has happened here.
Greensburg, 10 years after the disaster. Well, good evening. You are watching KAKE News, the 10th anniversary of the deadly Greensburg tornado. I'm Jim Grimes. Deb Ferris is live in the town of Greensburg with our special coverage. Deb, the city has a lot of events planned to commemorate today, don't they?
Yeah, Jim, we are at the Big Well Park here in Greensburg, and I can tell you this community is coming together starting today. All kinds of people have been coming downtown to talk about the events of that day. We're seeing people come in from out of town who were here 10 years ago. Now, if you remember that day, a massive tornado ripped through the town of Greensburg. It took hundreds of homes and businesses. So many people here lost their homes and everything they owned.
Well, we're kind of playing watch and wait for the development of severe weather across parts of south central to southwestern Kansas.
It was May 4th, 2007. Outside, a calm and humid day. But as evening set in, conditions changed. Severe weather began moving through Kansas, setting up for the perfect storm.
This is from the National Weather Service in Dodge City. They have issued a tornado emergency. This is very rare.
It was just before 10 o'clock that night. A massive EF5 tornado was bearing down on the small town of Greensburg.
Very large tornado. Okay, I don't know who reported it which. We have two tornadoes on the ground, Jay.
Greensburg took a direct hit.
You could hear the top half of our house start tearing up.
It was just quiet, and all of a sudden, poof, house just started flying apart in pieces.
KAKE storm chasers were some of the first on scene after the storm passed.
Where you at, sir? Hold on. I'm right. Okay, calm down. Where you at? He's all right. You're I don't either.
Survivors crawled out of the rubble of what used to be their homes. The devastation was massive. 95% of the town was flattened.
This town is completely just about destroyed. There's nothing left.
There's no way anybody can fathom what has happened here.
The tornado was estimated to be 1.7 miles wide, wider than the city itself. 13 people were killed in Greensburg and in other nearby towns. At least 60 people were injured. City Hall, the school, and businesses all destroyed. But the people of Greensburg didn't give up hope.
It'll come back. It will. It doesn't look like it right now with all the devastation, but it will.
Yeah, and the town of Greensburg has come back in so many ways. There aren't 1,500 people here like there were that night, but hundreds and hundreds of people vowed to rebuild, and they certainly did. Now, so many people have come up to me today. They've been telling me their stories of survival. Joining me now is Sarah Schmidt. And Sarah, you were here during the tornado that night, you and your husband, Harold. And Harold unfortunately passed away from his injuries. But Sarah, first of all, tell me what this weekend, what today means to you.
It means a lot to me because it's another remembrance of him, but I've moved on from it.
Yeah, and thinking back, everybody's been telling me their stories. Kind of walk me through, if you can, just when that tornado hit, where were you and Harold?
We had just gone to the basement to be safe, and so we were sitting in the basement, and he stood up because he wanted a flashlight when the lights went out, and just he did why it picked him up and carried him across the room and put him on the divan and brought the truck in at the same time, landed on him.
And that's what injured him. And you were okay, though.
Yeah.
And when it passed, describe what it was like when you finally crawled out of all of that.
It's kind of indescribable. Everything was ajar, and only light I could see was when it would flash. And I had told him, I said, well, there's a truck in the basement. And he says, yes, I know, it's on me. And about that time, the lightning flashed. And of course, I was being hit with a huge hailstorm. It felt like a huge hailstorm. And I could see him there. And my only thought was get that truck off of him somehow.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, we appreciate you being here so much. And I know some of your family has come in to be with you this weekend for all of the events. And we appreciate you. And I'm so sorry for your loss. You're such a sweet person.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, sweetie. And you know, that tornado did take 11 lives when it tore through this town 10 years ago today. Our own Jay Prater was actually tracking that storm that night. He joins us live with a look at that tornado and the path it took.
One lone thunderstorm produced almost 24 tornadoes. But that night, there were 4 strong to violent tornadoes. We look back at the damage path and how they presented themselves on Doppler radar. These are the big 4 tornado tracks. The EF5 damage-producing Greensburg tornado started just south of the Kiowa County line in Comanche County, was on the ground for 65 minutes before it dissipated in a loop northwest of town. Followed by the EF3 damage-producing Truesdale tornado. It too was on the ground 65 minutes, just missing Truesdale to the west. The Hopewell tornado, 58-minute duration on the ground, just missing Hopewell and dissipating south of Maxville. And then the Maxville tornado, which developed to the southeast of Maxville and missing St. John to the northwest, 24 minutes on the ground. Looking at radar that night, these storms in Oklahoma were dissipating, and then finally towards 8 o'clock, that is what will become the Greensburg tornado-producing thunderstorm. Some smaller tornadoes near Ashland and Protection, but the big tornado started to form around 9 o'clock. Here it is, approaching US 183, the impressive Hook Echo, and moving through town starting at 9:45. On the north side of town, that's probably the tornado and the debris lofted getting thrown out of the vortex. The Truesdale tornado starts to form. It moves to the northeast, followed by the Hopewell tornado developing and tracking towards Maxville. It dissipates, and then the Maxville tornado develops and moves to the northwest of St. John before it dissipates. That's reflectivity. In terms of velocity, green towards the radar, red is away. This is what would be the storm producing the Greensburg tornado. Notice the weaker circulations. Then this is where the circulation takes off as it rips into Kiowa County. Before it crosses 183, that's as high as this Doppler velocity product goes, moving through town. You'll see it move to the north hook before it dissipates, and then here comes the circulation for the Truesdale tornado. It takes off, and then you'll see the circulation develop for the Hopewell tornado as it takes off towards Maxville, and then finally the Maxville tornado circulation developing, crossing US 50 and dissipating northwest of St. John. Looking at the radar data that night was absolutely gut-wrenching. Thankfully, those kind of scenarios are extremely rare. Today, we've got a beautiful day in Greensburg. And coming up later on in KAKE News, we'll talk about a stretch of warmer and drier days ahead.
That massive tornado and the destruction it left behind caught the attention of the entire nation. As you can imagine, people came from all over to help with the relief efforts. And just 4 days after the tornado hit, then President George W. Bush came to Greensburg to get a first-hand look at all the damage. The president toured the town and offered support to Greensburg residents who lost everything.
I am struck by the strength of the character of the people who live here in the plains. People who refuse to be, who refuse to have their spirit affected by this storm.
President Bush returned to Greensburg 1 year later to deliver the commencement address for the 2008 Greensburg High School senior class. The president said the students of Greensburg set an example by finishing school and helping the town get back on its feet. Now, as part of the rebuilding efforts here in Greensburg, the folks here did something a little bit different. Instead of just rebuilding like it was here, the folks here decided to go green. KAKE's Chris Frank joins us live now with more on that part of the story. Chris.
Well, Deb, you know, Greensburg was named after an old stagecoach driver back in the 1800s named D.R. Cannonball Green, hence the name Greensburg. But after the tornado, the city decided to add a second meaning to its name by going environmentally green.
It was about taking care of our environmental, all those resources that we have.
Visitors to Greensburg can learn its history on the walls of the Big Well Museum. That story includes rebuilding green.
Let's build back green. We're Greensburg.
Folks here had to rebuild, so why not go green? The electric generating windmills and other green technology here is said to be a throwback to Greensburg's pioneering ancestors who took advantage of the wind, solar, and geothermal energy.
It's just that we have the advanced technologies today to enhance what they already knew about being environmental stewards.
What can we do to just build smarter?
The local schools try to incorporate as much green technology into their new buildings, including natural lighting.
Features that make our gym green are the sawtooth, the indirect lighting that comes in.
Principal Durstein says it saves on electricity, though there are lights if needed. The school is one of several Greensburg buildings which generates electricity with windmills.
It just makes a difference in our electric bill.
And when it rains, the water is captured with a series of downspouts and gutters to direct the water into large cisterns for use later.
And we have capabilities to collect over 100,000 gallons of water.
Using green energy works its way into classroom lessons also, so that future generations learn a sustainable lifestyle.
To me, it just seems normal seeing all this stuff everywhere, but sometimes I'll go to other towns and notice how it's completely different. But I think that it's really, it improved our town, and we made a lot of good decisions using all of this green stuff.
That's wisdom from an 8th grader. And Mayor Dixon says going green actually makes economic sense, saying that if the town had to do it over again, they'd go green. Live in Greensburg, Chris Frank, KAKE News.
And of those homes destroyed here in Greensburg, there was one couple, Bob and Ann Dixon. Now, 10 years later, the couple has rebuilt their home here in Greensburg, and Bob Dixon is now running the town. His grandfather and former postal worker has been the mayor since 2008.
What people see in Greensburg right now, they see hope that communities can survive if they choose to be informed, involved, and engaged in their community.
Hear more from those residents who stayed and who remember that terrifying night 10 years ago. Lily Wu will have much more on that story coming up tonight on KAKE News at 10. And now there are all kinds of events planned for this weekend starting tonight. Here's a quick rundown of what's going on in Greensburg. Starting at 7:30 tonight, the Starlight Public Art Park dedication will take place. That's at 240 South Main. Then at 8:30, the unveiling and lighting of the Beacon sculpture. Again, that's over on Main Street. And then at 9 o'clock, that's when they're going to hold the memorial service here at the Big Well Memorial at 315 South Sycamore. They will list off all the names of the people who were killed in Greensburg that night. And then finally at 9:45, the very minute when that huge tornado hit, we will be remembering that with a moment of silence. And remember to stay with continuing coverage of KAKE News. Greensburg 10 years after the when we come back, but first we're remembering those victims. Welcome back to Greensburg, where we are commemorating the 10th anniversary of that deadly tornado that hit here May 4th of 2007. All kinds of events planned for the weekend beginning tonight. Here's a look at what's happening, at least tonight. At 7:30 at the Starlight Public Park, they'll have the Starlight Public Art Park dedication. That's on Main Street. Then at 8:30, the unveiling and lighting of the Beacon sculpture. Then at 9 o'clock, the memorial service at the Big Well Memorial. That's here on Sycamore. And then at 9:45, a moment of silence will be observed to mark the time that tornado hit. And then coming up tonight at 6 o'clock, we'll have much more on those activities, along with stories from survivors. And we'll have one story from a couple who says their wedding was actually saved by the tornado. That and much more coming up tonight on KAKE News at 6. We'll be right back.